Hey guys, I just want to start this off by first saying the Catholic Church is the universal church, and the Catholic Church is not going to endorse a particular candidate. As far as me giving my opinion, who's the choice for Catholics, it's just my opinion. But my opinion is based on 40 years of studying politics, knowing what the left and right is going to argue on each issue, and I'll read 10 articles from each side before I come to my decision of who's closest to the Catholic position. And as far as the Catholic position, I was an evangelical for 30 years, but I spent years studying Catholic beliefs and teachings before I decided to come back. So that's my qualifications, in case you're wondering. Plus, who's ever going to win has to win the blue-collar vote. So I'm going to give you a blue-collar Catholic perspective on who I think more closely aligns to the Catholic position. And I also want to say this. As Americans, our First Amendment is one of our greatest freedoms, freedom of speech. So if you disagree with me, you're not going to offend me, put it in the comments and give me your strongest argument. Because like St. Thomas Aquinas says, if you're going to win an argument, go after your opponent's strongest arguments. So I always try and see the other side's strongest argument and try and beat that. So again, this is my opinion. I'm not saying this to anger anybody or to stir anybody up. I'm just giving you things. Hopefully, I'll give you some stuff to think about that maybe you haven't heard before. That's my goal. Or maybe I'll just be repeating the same thing that you hear every day. I don't know. So here we go. You have two candidates, Joe Biden, Donald Trump. One candidate actually gave the eulogy for Ku Klux Klan leader, and one candidate received an award from Jesse Jackson for the advancement of the African Americans in this country. Now, as a Catholic, our social justice teaching is the dignity of the human being has to be preserved. That all human beings have dignity in God's eyes, everyone. And racism is not to be tolerated by the Catholic Christian. So, Joe Biden, when he was vice president in 2010, gave a 30-minute eulogy for former Grand Kleagle of the Ku Klux Klan, former Democrat Senator Robert Byrd. In 1999, I believe it was, Jesse Jackson gave an award to Donald Trump for helping in the advancement of African Americans in this country. In fact, if you Google it, he got about 20 awards between Jackson and other black leaders throughout his career as a businessman, because he wasn't always a politician. He was a businessman most of his life. And in business, he donated a ton of money to African American causes and helped in any way he can. So if you're surprised that Joe Biden, while he was a sitting vice president of the United States, would give a 30-minute eulogy for a former Ku Klux Klan leader, if you're surprised by that, now you know why we call the media fake news. We don't call it fake news because Donald Trump calls it fake news. Donald Trump calls it fake news because guys like me have been calling it fake news for 30 years. That's the truth. So, Robert Byrd was a Democrat senator. Actually, in the 80s, the Democrats voted him majority leader, the leader of the Senate, when they were in charge. He passed away, a sitting senator, in 2010. And like I said, he was a former Grand Kleagle. Not a Grand Wizard. A Grand Wizard would be like the leader. Kleagle is probably more important to the Klan because they're the recruiters. And Robert Byrd, Democrat Senator Robert Byrd, bragged that he recruited 150 of his racist friends into the Ku Klux Klan. Now, if you're surprised by that, I'll give you a brief history. The Republican Party was created to end slavery. The first Republican president was Abraham Lincoln. After slavery was outlawed, the Democrat Party started the Ku Klux Klan to keep blacks in line. And up until the 1960s, if you wanted a prominent position in the Democrat Party, you would have to be part of the Ku Klux Klan. That's why Robert Byrd rose to prominence within the Democrat Party. Now, if you go to your college professor and present him with that, he can't deny the facts. But what he will say was, yeah, but after the civil rights movement, all the racist Democrats became Republican. And I researched that. I couldn't find one. And in fact, Robert Byrd, he stayed a Democrat till he died, 2010. Also, the Democrats voted against civil rights. They voted against the voting rights. And these were, different. They weren't at the same exact day. So they had a chance to switch parties after that. And they stayed. In fact, if you watched the first Democrat debate where Joe Biden got reamed basically because he said, I remember in the 80s and 90s, there was civility. I could reach across and make a deal with two segregationist politicians, even though I didn't agree with their racist theology, racist ideology rather, I could, partner with them to get things done. But what he didn't mention, and what the media didn't mention, those two racist senators were Democrats. They were Senator Talmadge, Herman Talmadge, and James Easley. So this was in the 80s. Biden's bragging about he reached across. So makes you think he reached across party lines, but he didn't. He reached within his own racist party. And in fact, in the 80s, Biden was talking about some racial issue, and you can Google this on YouTube. He dropped the N-word like 5 or 6 times, like it was nothing. Now, he wasn't calling people the N-word. He was calling out other people who used it, but he used it so easily that it's disturbing. Like, he didn't say the N-word. He actually said the word. And Robert KKK Byrd, who I just mentioned, was on an interview in 2005, and a live interview, and I heard him drop the N-word like 10 times. And again, he wasn't saying it was good, but he was using it with such ease. So, on a race issue, that's what you're getting with Joe Biden. A history of racism and supporting racists. Donald Trump, what has he done? Okay, so Joe Biden passed or sponsored a crime bill in 1996 where Democrat President Bill Clinton signed it, called the Crime Bill of 96, I guess. This crime bill, I seen Joe Biden, and I'm sure you can Google it, on the floor of the Senate bragging, this crime bill, there's about 40 different things that could put you away for life. And he was right. People were getting put away for life for one drug offense. And you know what 90% of these people were? African Americans. The African American leaders in this country have been trying to get that crime bill taken away since 1996. And you know who did it? Donald Trump in his first year with criminal justice reform. And even Democrat strategist, African American Van Jones, said what Donald Trump did, getting rid of this horrible crime bill that Joe Biden sponsored in the 90s, did more for African Americans than any president has done for them in the last 50 years. That's coming from an African American Democrat, Van Jones. And because of that crime bill, over 100,000 men were released from jail, and 90% of them were African Americans who would have stayed there till they died if it wasn't for Donald Trump. And what else can we do to help bring equality to this race issues in this country? Education is the key. The Republican Party for years have been trying to give school choice to African Americans. So if you're in a poor, dilapidated, rundown school, you could take your voucher, a school voucher, and go to an upper class, white, wealthy school. Or you can take it and go to a Catholic school. Or you can take it and go to a good Protestant school. The parent would have the choice. The parent would have the power. I seen this done in the 80s in Jersey City. The mayor gave school choice. And the African American students' test grades were higher than the whites, higher than the Asians even. And then a Democrat took over a few years later and got rid of that program, and their test scores went down. That's your Democrat Party, because the teachers' unions don't care about the children. The teacher unions control the Democrats when it comes to school choice, and they don't want school choice. Also, education, upper education, higher education. Donald Trump tripled the amount of money that went to historical black colleges. Not only did he triple it, but they used to have to come groveling back every year and ask for money from Congress. And Trump said, no, I'm just going to give you 10 years worth. So he gave them 10 years worth, and every year is triple what they were receiving from any other president, So again, on the race issue, I think Donald Trump wins the Catholic vote if you're just looking at race. But there's other things to look at as Catholics. So another thing that we look at is war. War kills a lot of people. War harms a lot of people. The military-industrial complex likes to keep these wars going, to keep their coffers full. I look back on the history of Joe Biden, I couldn't find one war he was against. He supported the Iraq War. When I seen Donald Trump, long before he was president, bashing George Bush about the Iraq War. I thought he was a Democrat, how bad he bashed him. And then I seen him in the first debate in Texas, in the George Bush Museum, bash George Bush about the Iraq War. He got booed by the Republicans. He got booed. He was the only Republican, aside from Rand Paul, who's against every war. He was the only one that was against it. And I even thought then, wow, there's no way he's going to win bashing George Bush. But the American people realize these endless wars are not good. Joe Biden supported every war in his 47-year career. He goes all the way back to 1973. So he was there at the end of the Vietnam War, so I can't find if he supported it or not. But he did not support the 130,000 Vietnamese refugees that we saved, that if we would have left behind, they would have been massacred. And Republican President Gerald Ford commanded our troops to evacuate as many as we can. We got 130,000 of them out, and Joe Biden was against helping these refugees. And you will say, well, what about these refugees now? I see Trump putting little children in cages. Again, listen very carefully. I watched the news when Glenn Beck in 2014 went down to the border and said these children are being put in cages. And then Obama said we made these cages. President Obama said we made these cages to protect these children from getting raped by all these men who were coming across the borders illegally. Some bad people coming, some good people coming across the border, but there's a lot of bad people too. That's why we have to have it organized, not total chaos. Because people were getting hurt on the border, and Obama seen it, and Obama made these cages, and when the news was showing these cages and blaming Trump, they had to retract it. But they had headlines saying Trump putting children in cages, and then they had little line at the end, like maybe on the 5th page, saying we made a mistake. These cages have been there since 2014. President Obama put them up. Then we have to look at religious freedom. As Catholics, we have to look at religious freedom for the whole world, because Catholic is universal, the universal church. But not only look at religious freedom for Catholics, but for other minorities. For example, in China, the Uyghur Muslims are being sent to re-education camps where they're having forced abortions, getting organs taken out and sold on the black market. They're being treated horribly. And no one said anything about this because most of Washington has sold us out to China. Case in point, Hunter Biden making a $1.5 million salary working for a Chinese company, which he had no clue of what the business was about. But it's not just Democrats, it's Republicans. Trump set up a religious ambassador position, and he appointed Sam Brownback, who was the most pro-life governor in the country when he's governor of Kansas. He was an evangelical Christian, and now, like me, he became a Catholic Christian. And he's been calling out China putting a spotlight. China hasn't changed, but at least now people know about the Uyghur Muslims. And Sam Brownback has been preaching about this since he's been put in this position. And then on the home front, also we have Mike Pompeo, a devout Christian, as Secretary of State, who's always talking about religious freedom in the world and calling out problems with religious freedom in the world. But on the home front, we have Attorney General Barr fighting for religious freedom. When Joe Biden was vice president, his administration attacked the Little Sisters of the Poor, a Catholic convent, because they would not provide contraception for the nuns. They said it was against our religious convictions. So the Obama administration sent his AG to go after them. And this fight's been going on. The only difference now, President Trump sent his AG to protect them and fight for their religious right. And Little Sisters of the Poor won that fight. They do not have to provide contraception for their nuns. But Joe Biden recently said he would try his best to reverse that position. He said it. He's not on the side of religious freedom. And the most important, according to the Catholic bishops of the United States, the most important social issue is abortion. Now, the biggest abortion provider, ironically, is Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood was started by a woman named Margaret Sanger, who used to give speeches at KKK rallies, who said her goal was to exterminate the colored race. That was her goal. Recently Planned Parenthood finally admitted it, and they're taking her name off of buildings. But Planned Parenthood goal, Margaret Sanger said, what we have to do is put these clinics, they called them sterilization clinics. When she was alive, they were just sterilizing people. Like Nazi Germany. She said she admired the Nazis, actually, Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood, who my African-American friends call Planned Parenthood. But she said this: we need to put these clinics in black communities. 90% of Planned Parenthood clinics today are in black communities. Now listen to me very careful. More black babies in New York City every year are aborted than are born. The African American race is the only minority group that's not growing in population. African Americans make up about 13% of the population, but they make up about 33% of the abortions because they are targeted by Planned Parenthood. Donald Trump defunded Planned Parenthood, defunded $60 million from a Title X program. They still get about $400 million that Congress has to rescind. But what President Trump could do, he did. He defunded every penny that he could. Joe Biden said he would reverse that and give him that $60 million back. Also, Mike Pompeo announced under Donald Trump's leadership that we will renew the Mexico City policy, which means the United States will not donate a penny to any organization in the world that performs abortions. George Bush started that policy, and Joe Biden's administration rescinded it. Donald Trump put it back. So we no longer give money to organizations that are supposed to help the poor, but what they're doing is performing abortions on the poor. So the most important issue of our day, abortion, Joe Biden has accepted his party's radical stance that they'll have unlimited abortion for any reason through the ninth month. Donald Trump has said he will do everything he can to stop abortion in his country. And in fact, he put 200 originalist judges in federal positions, and that's what we need. We're not going to ask them if they're pro-life. We're going to say, do you believe in interpreting the Constitution as it was written, or do you believe you should legislate? He put 200 originalists, and he put 2 originalists on the Supreme Court. So when they look at the Constitution, they don't make up the right to abortion, which isn't in there. They look at what rights that we were given. And that's how we're going to reverse this horrible, horrible, murderous thing we call abortion. I mean, you would have to be a complete science denier to say the baby isn't a child. I mean, with 4D, 3D ultrasounds, we know that's a child being ripped apart. and they're focusing on our African American communities. So this is why there's a movement within the African American community called Walk Away. And this is why the latest Rasmussen poll puts 41% of African Americans supporting Donald Trump. Gallup poll has him about 20. It's probably somewhere in between. If those numbers hold up, if those polls are correct, Donald Trump wins in a landslide. But Joe Biden's going to do everything he can to convince the African American community that Donald Trump is a racist. He'll probably pick an African American for his VP, and he'll just keep calling Trump racist, 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 ignoring all his policies that had helped African Americans. Before this coronavirus, African American unemployment was the lowest in the history of America. And it wasn't by coincidence. Donald Trump promised to put opportunity zones in African American communities before the election, and he did. So businesses were afraid to go into these communities because they had high theft, they had high crime, high insurance. It was expensive. Trump said, you go to these communities and we'll cut your taxes so low, you're going to make money. So he, with these opportunity zones within urban areas, it revitalized these urban areas. And I work with a lot of African American men in my life, and they are hardworking men, hardworking blue-collar men that just want an opportunity. They don't want a handout. Democrats just want to give them handouts. They want to work. These men have dignity. These men are strong, and they appreciate the opportunity that these opportunity zones had given them. So again, on race, it always comes back to race. Abortion is about race. War is about race. It's always the minorities that are always getting hurt in these decisions by these politicians. So on race, abortion, war, religious freedom, I say it's 4-0. And these are the four things as a Catholic I think are most important. There's other issues that we could talk about, but as a Catholic, I think these are the moral issues we got to look at. And as a Catholic, I support Donald J. Trump for president. And if you disagree, put in the comments. Please, as always, be polite. Most of you guys usually are. Give me your best argument. Again, this is just my opinion. This isn't the official Catholic position. It's just my opinion as a blue-collar Catholic. And why I think Donald Trump has 81% of the evangelical vote, and the latest poll showing like 60% of the Catholic vote this time. It's up 20% since last time. So if those numbers hold and the African American vote holds, it's a landslide. So this is, again, my opinion as a blue-collar Catholic. Take it for what it's worth. God bless. Stay Catholic and vote.